This was a dvar torah that Rabbi Oelbaum requested to be printed because it was a very beautiful vort on Ki Sisa, and he allowed us, he gave us permission to put it in the sefer.
In this year, Be'ezus Hashem, we'll give an appreciation of the wonderful gift, the wonderful matana called Shabbos. We'll begin first with the Gemara in Sefer Shabbos, Daf Yud Days. The Gemara tells us, V'marova, Bar Machasi, Omarav Choma, Bar Guri, Omarav, Hanoisin matana l'chaveiro, Yitzorech lo idioi. If one gives a matana, a gift to his chaver, one must notify him, Shinema, as the Posik says in Parshas Ki Sisa, regarding the mitzvah of Shabbos, the Posik says, Lodas, they should know, they should be aware what they have. Lodas, they should know, Ki ani Hashem mekadishchem. The Gemara says, Tanya Namahocha, Lodas, Ki ani Hashem mekadishchem, Omaloya Kodesh Baruch Hu l'Moshe. Matana toive yeshli bebeis genozai. I have a very good matana in my treasure house, hidden away. The Shabbos Shemo. And the name of that matana is Shabbos. And Mevakish listenali Yisrael. Lech voidio. And I wish to give this Shabbos, this matana to Klal Yisrael. Go and be media them what they are getting and what they are receiving. So, Bemes, there are a number of kashas regarding this Gemara. First of all, why Bechlal was it necessary for the Gemara to use the Lashon Matana toive yeshlu bebeis genozai? Kodesh Baruch was saying to Moshe Rabbeinu, I have a good matana. After all, the word matana, the whole musig of matana by its very definition implies something that is good. Matana means I'm giving something to someone, it's a gift. Whether the gift is more expensive, whether it's less expensive, but the etzim idea of a matana be'etzim is something that's good. So what is the emphasis, the hadgoshe, matana toiva yeshli bebeis genozai? And second of all, what does the Gemara Bechlal mean? That Kodesh Baruch was saying to Moshe Rabbeinu, I have a matana toiva hidden away, bebeis genozai, and I wish to give it to Klal Yisrael. The obvious question is, Mitzvah Shabbos was already long given in Morah. And also in Parshas Yisroi, we found that it's mentioned already in the Seres Dibris. If so, what was Neschadish now in Parshas Ki Sisa? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu, go and be Mediah Klal Yisrael that I'm giving them a matana. The Chayr, this is already an old matana. In addition to that, we find a very fascinating Tosfos, Masechta Sanhedrin, of Lamed Zayin Amud Beis, and the Pasuk in Tehillim, Miknaf ha'oretz Zmiros Shomanu, that from the end of the earth we hear Zmiros, we hear Shiras and Sishbachis to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tosfos quotes, Kosu b'tshuvas hagoyim, is written, the tshuvas hagoyim she'im b'nei Yisrael oimnim kedusha ela b'Shabbos. That the Bnei Eretz Yisrael do not say Kedusha only on Shabbos. The Chsiv, because there's a pasuk in Yeshaya, that B'chayis, concerning the Chayis HaKodesh, the heavenly Malachim, that are called the Chayos, it says, Sheish Kenufayim Leyechot, that each Malach has 6 wings. B'chol Konof Voim Meshira, Achas, B'yoin, B'sheiches Yimei Achoil. And each wing says Shira to Kodesh Baruch Hu. During the 6 days of the Yimei Achoil, 6 wings for 6 days. V'shagia Shabbos, and when Shabbos arrives, we don't have an extra wing for Shabbos. So what are we going to do about Shabbos? Because there is another wing. As it says, Miknaf ha'oretz Zmiros Shomanu. In other words, what we're being told, that regarding Shabbos, there is something extra special. And that is a very special shira that is being said on Shabbos, and that is the Kedusha. Kedusha is something that's reserved to be said for Shabbos, according to the Tshuvas HaGoyim. We can see more about this in the sefer Margolis Hayom, who brings down B'Shem the Ravid and Sha'ar Rishonim. And the shal is whether the kavana is that the Bnei Yisrael don't say Kedusha at all, only b'Shabbos, or the kavana is only regarding Kedusha's Keser, that is said only a Shabbos. In any case, we see from here that Taisus is telling us that Kedusha is something that's miyuchad dapke for Shabbos. And the question is, what is the particular shaykhis of the shira of Kedusha to be said dapke on Shabbos? Another thing that deserves to be looked at and to analyze, we know that in the Nusach of Filu Shabbos after Baruch Hu, we say, Yoytze roer uvar lechoshech, Oytze shalom uvayres hakol. Now this Nusach Betzim we say in the weekdays as well. Yoytze roer uvar lechoshech, Oytze shalom uvayres hakol. If one looks in the source of this pasuk in the Navi, the pasuk actually reads, Oytze shalom uvayre ra. However, Chazal have given us the Nusach to say, Yoytze roer uvar lechoshech, Oytze shalom uvayres hakol. And this also deserves to be explained, what the kavan of Chazal is instead of a bayri ra, but rather the nusach is a bayri sakoil. But in any case, what we have is afterwards a piyut, which is miyuchet for Shabbos, after the Yoytze roer, which of course begins with hakol yeducha, v'hakol yishabchucha, v'hakol yoimru ein kodesh kashem, hakol yirememucha selo Yoytze hakoil. And the question is, why was it necessary to repeat the word hakol so many times? It certainly would have been enough to say the word hakol only once, in the beginning of the piyut. Could have easily stated, hakol yoiducha, the yeshabchucha, the yoimru en kodesh kashem, the yiroimemucha selo. After all, according to the present nusach, it comes out that we actually are chayzer of the word hakol 6 times. First we said, Oyse Shalom Avayres HaKoil, and then we said another 5 times, Hakol Yiduka, B'Hakol Shabchucha, and so on. What is the purpose? What is the purpose of repeating the word HaKoil so many times? In addition, also, we find something very interesting. According to Nusach Ashkenaz, there is a Shinui HaNikr. There's clearly an open Shinui between the Nusach that was saying the weekdays. The weekdays after Yoytze roer, there's a pasuk, Morabu Masecha Hashem Kulam B'Chochma Sisa. However, on Shabbos, according to Nusach Ashkenaz, in the piyut of Hakol Yeducha, it is omitted. We don't say it. And the question is, what is the reason? What is the reason that on Shabbos we do not say Morabu Masecha Hashem? In order to clarify all of these inyanim, behooves us to look a little bit back into one of the most difficult questions from time immemorial. It is one of the most difficult shaila, something that was bothered by great philosophers and great thinkers. A very, very painful question, which truly, in fact, challenges the emunah of each and every person. And one, on account of this kasha, from time immemorial, has to strengthen himself and be mechazik himself in his firm belief in Emunah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and not to question HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that is an old age question, which the Gemara tells us is a question that was already raised by Moshe Rabbeinu, as we find in the Gemara, Mesechus Brachos, Daf Zayin, Omer Aleph. Tosik in Parshas Ki Sisa, Moshe Rabbeinu says, Oidienu na, as the Rochecho, Rebbeinu Shalom, show me your ways. Now the Gemara in Brachos interprets this phrase, Moshe Rabbeinu's question, to mean, Bikesh lo idiyoi drochav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'nosamoi. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu explained it to Moshe, Shenem ha'idiyenu no drochecho omar alefonoch. Moshe Rabbeinu said, Rebbeinu Shalom, if the ma yish tzadik v'toivloi v'yish tzadik v'raloi. Yish rosha v'toivloi v'yish rosha v'raloi. How are you to understand that the derech of Rishoyim, that many Rishoyim, that they are matzliach, and they have a good life, they have a peaceful life, they have a tranquil life. Yet on the other hand, the tzaddik, who is the Oved Hashem, the true Oved Hashem, the true servant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's tzaddik v'raloi. He nevertheless undergoes, unfortunately, never so many tzaras, and so many incidents, and so many inyonim of pain and suffering. Why is it that the tzaddikim suffer, and yet we find Rishoyim that the sun shines upon them, and it's Rosh V'Toivloi. As mentioned, this is a very, very difficult question, which is already addressed by the Ramban himself to the Hagdoma to sefer Iyuv. Ramban says as follows: There's something that is very, very painful to the heart, and also quite painful. It's a burden on the machshav and on the mind. This particular question, points out the Ramban, is so difficult that mimeno levadoi, that because of this question alone, nimshichu rabim b'chol hadoros, in all the generations, says the Ramban, likfira gemuret. It was this question that led them to kfira gemuret. The who, and the question is, herois ba'olam, that we observe in the world, mishpat mokol. We see what appears to be an unjust mishpat. It appears that Kodesh Baruch Hu is not conducting the world in a fair way. From the fact that v'tzadik v'raloi and v'rosha v'toivloi, ki yomru, because the Mesoilam, the people of the world, observe and they say, and they question, ba'dua derech pleini u'pleini tzleicha, why is it that this particular person's lot in life is a life of atzloche, is a life of success, and v'loma, and then on the other hand, why is it that pleini u'pleini sheyiru tzadikim avdu, we find that tzadikim on the other hand have, in fact, an opposite life, a life of yisurim and pain and tsar. Zeh shoirish hameri. Ramban goes as far as to say that this is the root of the rebellion, b'chol ha'amerdim mikolum of Aloshin. More than anything, from all the peoples, from all the nations of the world, the kasher, the most difficult question that leads them to kfira, is because they cannot make peace with this question. They see what they believe to be a mishpat ma'ukul, to an unjust world. How can there really be a God and allow this to happen? How is it possible that tzadik v'raloi and Rosha v'toivloi? We, of course, are not going to make an attempt to answer this question, because the real answer, why is it that the Rosha v'toivloi and the tzadik v'raloi, the answer to that question will actually only be revealed Bez Hashem kishiyavoi Mashiach tzidkeinu b'meir b'yameinu. But what we would, in fact, like to explain is, what should be the real machshava of a Yid? How should a Yid be thinking b'negei this kasha? What should be the true hashkafa of a Yid? What is the Torah hashkafa regarding this question? And also, in addition, to understand that how does this connect with the inyan, with the theme of Kedusha Shabbos that we're speaking about? How does Kedusha Shabbos relate regarding this particular very, very difficult question? How does this mekusher to the inyan of Shabbos? We are very well aware, Rabbi Isai, that of course, that when it comes to Kabbalah Shabbos, we have a whole seder of various mizmairim, b'chudaranana, and so on. However, Mikra Aloche, we know and we're well aware from the Pleiskim and Shulchan Aruch that the Ikar Kabbalah Shabbos, Friday night, Leil Shabbos Kodesh, truly begins with Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbos, Toiv Lo'odos B'Shem. The source of this capital, of course, was said by the Mauritian. He was really the Machaber of Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbos, as the Medrash Rabbah points this out in Parashas Bereshis. However, what we are going to address ourselves is to a very simple question. That if in fact Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbos, the title of this capital, purports to sing a song, L'Kavod Yom HaShabbos, Toiv Lo'odos L'Hashem, what is very, very evident and cries out in front of us when we read the various psukim of this capital, glaringly staring us in the face, is the fact that there is not one mention at all about Shabbos throughout the entire capital. So what Bechlal has this got to do with Shabbos? Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbos? Where? What do we find in this capital that in fact has anything to do with Shabbos? The omission is so glaringly evident, and how are we to understand this? So the first item, therefore, we have regarding this question is in fact none other than the Maharal himself, the Maharal in Prague, in his sefer Netzach Yisrael in Perek Yutes. But the moral is Betzim is Ma'ira, this Dover Pella, that the entire Mizmor is not mentioned even once. Bechal, Shum Minyan, that is a Shaykhis to Shabbos. If we take a look at the words of the Maral says, Dal Dover Zeh, Yosa David, Olav Sholem HaMizmor Shili Yom HaShabbos. Dal Dover Zeh, what the Maral says, really means Dal Dover Zeh, based upon what he said before, that regarding that Shabbos is the Hashloma, that this is truly the completion of Brias Olam. So Dover HaMelech, in regard to the Cheshivas of Yom HaShabbos, being the Hashloma of the Bria, but Melech was Miyas, and he brings down Nizmor Shili Yom HaShabbos. However, the Maral raises the question, that he says Mizmor Shili Yom HaShabbos. So what shaykh does it have with Shabbos altogether? So the Maral, I'll tell you and I'll explain. Because it is on Shabbos that the Bria Olam, that creation of the world, was completed. In other words, what the Maral first of all is telling us, not the way that we would simply observe, looking at the surface at creation, the way we look at it, we see that Kodesh Baruch Hu actually created the world in 6 days. In Shabbos he rested. So Shabbos he didn't do anything. Shabbos is no shaykhs with Bria Olam. Bria Olam only has a shaykhs with 6 days. And Shabbos is a day that Kodesh Baruch Hu rested. However, the Maral tells us it's not so. Then the same way, the Shezis Mei Amaise are the 6 days of creation. The truth, in fact, is that we have 7 days of creation. Except the 7th day, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created in a passive way. One is able to create in a positive way, in an active way. But Shabbos is the Hashlom of the Bria. What Shabbos added to the Bria is, that's the Hashlom. Shabbos is not merely an extra day after creation, but Shabbos itself is what is Mashlam. That's the final nail, which is Geirim, the Hashloma of Brias Olam. And as many Meforshim point out, in the same way that in the human body, we have a guf and we have a neshama, and the guf certainly cannot live without the neshama. The neshama is which gives chiyus and vitality to the guf. So too, regarding the 7-day week, the Sheishas Yimei HaChoil are the guf of the week, represent the body of the week, and Shabbos is the nefesh, Shabbos vayinopash. Without Shabbos, there's no life in the Sheishas Yimei HaChoil at all. So in order to have a viable world, to have a world that is alive, we need Shabbos. Shabbos is the Hashlomah. Shabbos was Mashlam, the nefesh to the Bria. Because here's the Maral says, and since, being that there are those that say, there are people who complain and criticize the world. They're not happy with Hashem's creation. They criticize. In their opinion, he says, there are mistakes made in the Bria. There are things that doesn't stim, there are things that doesn't work out. Ubefrat, especially, said the Maral, concerning the question, this is considered by many to be a great chesaret. So therefore, regarding this question, Omar, therefore in Tehillim we say, Mizmor Shili Yom HaShabbos Tov L'Hoides L'Hashem, that when Shabbos comes, when Shabbos contributes, that now that we have Shabbos, we realize that everything is just and everything is right, and there's reason to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ki yesh l'hoides Hashem Yisbarach hashleimus habriya, v'shelo yimtza chesarim bebriya rak hakol bashloma. Shabbos tells us that in fact that we have a perfect world. However, we don't recognize it on this world. But the truth being that this Hashlama, that in fact truly exists, is something that will not be recognized only in Olam Haba. Therefore, the Melech says in Tehillim, Mizmor Shili Yom HaShabbos, which means that when will we really be capable of singing? In other words, to really understand that whatever Kodesh Baruch Hu did, that everything that Kodesh Baruch Hu does, is everything is l'toiv. This will be L'Yom HaShabbos, which means Upershu Zal. Chazal said the end of Masechtas Tomit, L'Yom Shekul HaShabbos, U'menucha L'chai Yolomim, which means Ki Apim Nire B'Olam Hazeh Dovar Mashu Chesari, that even though from the vantage point and from the look and the view and from the lenses that we look in this world, many things appear to be chesar and many things appear to have deficiencies. Al mitzad olam haba yushlam hakoil. But mitzal olam haba, everything be'emes is perfect. The chesroin is that we look and we see and we raise, and it appears to us to be chesroin. This is only from the vantage point of being here in olam hazeh, looking at something that's incomplete. The other, what the moral is telling us very simply, that when you have a yid who had this kashed turning in his head, why did the tzaddik v'raloi in Rosh V'toivloi? The yid has this question, Hoidiyeni knows the rechecha. However, what the moral is telling us, but after a yid said this kapitel of Nizmar Shili HaMeshabes, then all the kashas have to be answered. Enochanami in the middle of the kapitel, Yitaka sees the question being raised itself. V'froyach Rishoyim Kamayesef, how is it that Rishoyim are able to blossom like grass, Vayetzitzu Kol Payal Yovem, that all the Payal Yovem, all the evil doers, Vayetzitzu, they grow and they prosper and they develop. But Lamaisa, when he says Min Mashili HaMashabes, by the time he gets to the end of the kapitel, he said, Lahagid Ki Yosher Hashem Tzuri V'loyav Lo Saboy. He then realized that whatever Kodesh Baruch Hu did, Bemis is really perfect. It's 100% satisfaction guaranteed. Because Shabbos is Men Olam Haba. Mizmar Shili HaMashabes, Yom Shekul Shabbos. And there, Be'emes, there is no chesaron. It is only here, Ba'olam Hazeh, that it appears to be a chesaron, because we don't understand. Our seichel is limited. Ishbar lo yedo, chsil lo yovin azois. Kozman, we are in this world, we have limited vision. We are in the bechin of an ishbar, as a foolish person, a boor. And the bechin of a ksil. And therefore, says the Maral, Mizmar Shili HaMashabes, L'yem Shekul Shabbos, B'olam Haba, then Be'emes we will understand, and all our kashas will be for emperors. So when we say Mizmar Shili HaMashabes, then even though he doesn't really know the reason, but now he understands that whatever appears to be wrong in this world is merely because he's not able to see it. But L'olam Haba, Be'emes, everything is for emperor. In the world of Shabbos, there are no kashas. Everything is just and everything is perfect. Everything is betmimis. And he is then very able to sing a song and to say Toiv Lahiz Hashem, to thank Hashem for everything that he performed, that he did in creation. Because in the world of Shabbos, which is Men Olam Haba, there are no chesroinis. It's a perfect world. It's a world of Hashlama. In order to understand the Yoimik Advarim and how a Yid is supposed to think and what should be the shkaf of the Yid benegay to this kasha, it would help us a lot to take a look at the words of the Ramchal, precious words of the Ramchal in the sefer Das Tevunos. Ramchal in the sefer Das Tevunos starts with Omar HaSeichel. As you do it at the sefer Das Tevunos is based upon the various vikuchim and debates between the Seichel and the Neshama. So we have here the Seichel responding and the Seichel saying, the intellect. Chelke Abriya Zois. The halakim of the bria, of creation. Mishim mabit aleim lefi re'os einov. Anyone who looks at the world in a superficial way, but all that he'll see at first is inyonim that are scattered and they are completely separate. Perish. Bilti miskashim kulam el tachlis achas. The way he looks at the world, he does not see the items interconnected or interrelated, that all should be serving one purpose. He does not see that. In his mind, the way that he sees and the way that he perceives and observes, that everything that he sees in the Bria has its own individual tachlis. Without one needing the other. After all, we have so many minim, bedaimim in inanimate objects, so many different minim which belong to the category of vegetation. There's no way that he can see and understand that there is a kesher and a relationship that one really has to come on to the other. And that should all come together for one purpose. But rather, everything was created for its own purpose. The inyon of mashlim el. And each and every nivra, dover nivra in the world, is mashlim only its own tachlis for which it was created. Lo yoser, no more. However, says the Ramchal, this is a big mistake. Whoever looks a little bit deeper with wisdom, Yimtza will find Hayois Kolam Nimtsois Kulam Miskashrim Kesher Gomer Zebozeh. In fact, you will come to the realization that everything that we find here in the world, everything has a direct relationship. They are all connected with a Kesher Gomer Shekulam Tzvichen Lahashlim Hiyan She'elov Givna HaChochma Al Yoyna Babriya. HaKadosh Baruch Hu in creating the world had a specific tachlis. And in order to make that specific tachlis come about, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, which therefore means that each and everything that is created in this world, the purpose of each and everything is for this common tachlis, for the common goal to come about. The kulam is kaptzim l'tachlis achas, and everything is gathered together for this one purpose. Shetinoev rabin v'sidra momek me'oid. There are a lot of conditions in order to make this happen, and which involves a very deep seder, hard to understand and to see it, but kol chelkei habriyim morabim weile. All of the many chalokim in the bria, in fact, are not separate. They are not nifrid. But rather, hine alkein is yachsu kula meila la'ela beseder, but everyone actually has a relationship one with the other for the particular seder shirotzaso machshove el yoyne that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had in mind when he planned to build this world. When we kulam, and from all together, not individually, but from all together, yetzei ha'priya toiv horoyel etzeis ben ha'priya. In order for the perfect tachlis, for that wonderful fruit to come out of the bria, that can only take place because we had all of the various chalokim in the bria. As Ramchal said, I already said that this is very deep to understand and to see it, because when we look at the world, we don't understand how does one chaya have a shaykhis with something else, and how does this have a shaykhis with that? How does the ant have a shaykhis with the elephant? And how does the elephant have a shaykh dafki with certain vegetation, with certain insects, and with certain other inyanim of the bria? And therefore, when we look and we dissect every chelik in the bria, we are not able to recognize and to see that actually they are working in harmony. That in fact they are not different separate pieces, but rather all of them in their own way are working together in the same way that we have a symphony of an orchestra, where we have different people playing different instruments. But nevertheless, everybody understands that each and every person is not doing his own thing, but rather they are working in unison and in harmony in order to produce that beautiful, wonderful sound that can only come about as a result of the collective efforts of each and every person in that orchestra, in that symphony. But the Machal is telling us that the entire Bria, everything that we find in the Bria, is part of this wonderful symphony. In order to bring about the Izgalus Kvayt Shemaim, which that is the purpose of the Bria, that we recognize the HaKadosh Baruch Hu's covet and kingship in this world, and all of the Chalakim in the Bria together, as being part of a larger picture, of being a chelik of that big puzzle, serve to accomplish and to bring this tachlis to fruition. And therefore the Ramchal goes on next, and he says, "Ube'emes tiri, truth be told, you will see, shegam b'masim ein ra nimtza b'yolam, that also in maisim, there's nothing really ra in this world, ela bechelkei advorim, where we perceive to be ra is only looking at the chalokim individually, in isolation. Terem is chabrom la'ashloma sadover, before they all come together to make up the perfect ashloma. Ach, however, says Ramchal, I want you to know, ein dover mushlam shi'ara. There's nothing in the bria which is mushlam, coming together. If you put all the pieces of the puzzle together, it's not shaykh that it is ra. Vizeh. And the reason for this is because Ki Danu, on the one hand, we know we should call Masha Kodesh Baruch Hu Oisu Achtoy Miyoid. We have that knowledge, we have that Kabbalah, we have that Emunah, that whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu does is Toiv Moed. And we might add what the Gemara tells us, that Kol Ma Dovid Rachman is L'tav of it. So Hine, therefore, says Ramachal, being that we already know that whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu does is only for the good. So Hine Ma Shenire Choser Betzarechot V'achad Mitnoy Advorim Nishlo Machesver Nahu B'tnai Acher Shemashlo Miyadoy. So the moral, when we look at the particular, the good of the world, and we see what appears to us to be a chesaron, but the truth is that chesaron becomes filled if we are able to connect and look at another part of the world, which really is the hashlama for this chesaron. But we, with our limited vision, are not able to make the connection between these two chalakim, and then we don't realize that there's another chalik which is being mashlim, the chesaron that we find in a different chalik. The only reason we perceive a certain chesar in a particular area is only why? Because you don't have all of the parts together. But once, when all the pieces and all the parts and all the halakim come together for one hashlama, then vadai hu toiv, then clearly we will see and recognize that this entice is good. And so points out the Maral, and he says further, that Bez Hashem, that we will recognize that everything is fine when Mashiach will come. Bizman shetiskayim havtochas, as Yeshayanov, he says, Oidcha Hashem ki onat be. We will come to the high madrega to recognize that we will even thank Hashem for getting angry at us. Something that at first glance, of course, appears to be midas adin, something that appears to be something which is very bad. And yet, Yeshayanov is able to say, Oidcha Hashem, I thank you not only for the good things, but also ki onat be, that you were angry with me. How is that possible? Says Ramchal. Simple. Because Kiyos, when that time will come, that will take place when we will have all the chalakim together. We will have all of the broken pieces of the puzzle as a davar shalom, and we look at it, and now we see the entire picture. Once we will be able to see the entire picture, we'll be able to see the complete puzzle, the hashloma. We will come to recognize that, in fact, everything, that every chelik of that puzzle, every chelik of that picture serves the positive purpose. And without it, we wouldn't have the hashlama that we, lamaisa taka, have. And we will recognize that everything, the emes, is good. So, Bekitzer Rabbeisai, where Ramchal teaches us a most important lesson in his sefer Das Tevunos, and that is, again, that if a Yid looks at every chelik and chelik of the Bria, benifrat, then certainly, so the Ramchal, you can be sure that he will see many pieces that in his mind are kulei ra. These are inyonim that have no esber. These are inyonim that have no beer. They're inyonim that have no pshat. And it appears to him that we have a situation, in fact, if it's tzadik v'raloi, it appears to him that we have a chesaron in the Bria. Yes, on the other hand, Avada, he also recognizes that the chelik toiv in the Bria. Certainly he recognizes in certain areas that there is hashkocha pratis, and he also recognizes the chesed and the toiv shaboy. But he does not believe, he does not recognize it, does not see that we really have a perfect world in all areas. He only sees the toiv where he sees it. But on the other hand, he also notices and perceives that there are many, many chesroinus in the world. There are deficiencies in the world. The way he sees it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's creation, there's something missing, there's something lacking. There's the inyan of tzaddik v'raloi v'roshi v'toivloi. So to this comes the Ramchal and says, Rabbi, all I want you to do is look at the Bria a little bit with a greater amkus, with a deeper havana, and with a more precise look. And you will understand that every aspect of the Bria is only one chelik. It's one part of a hashlama, of one larger, bigger, and better picture. And that is to bring out the kavod of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world, which has to come out from each and every nivra, from every chelik of the world. And if you think this way, then you will understand that when something chas v'sholem happens to you, which appears to be ra, it appears to be a chesar, and it appears to be beli tachlis, without a reason, without a pshat, without a hezber, without a biur. This is only because you are looking at each and everything beniprid. You're looking at it as extra, separate. But in the moment that you understand and you realize that whatever happened to you, that your experience is only a chelik cotton of the bigger, larger picture, then you will understand that each and every chelik is part of a tachlis gadol to bring about this great, wonderful tachlis, and there is no ra at all. Adrabah, his particular situation that you perceive to be ra, this itself is needed and necessary to be mashlim, the bigger, beautiful picture. And then you will understand that be'emes there is no metzias of ra at all in the world. Lefizeh, according to the Ramchal, we can now better understand, going back to the words of the Maral. The words of the Maral that we learned before take on a much greater meaning, and we will have a greater appreciation to what the Maral was telling us. Ikzavad the Maral says when we say Mizmar Shir Yom Shabbos, and we have many kashas when we look at the Bria, and we ask ourselves, As we say in Mizmor Shilya Shabbos, how's it possible that Bifrayach Rishoyim Kama Yesev? And the third, of course, will be that Ishbar Lo Yedo, Uchsilo Yobin Ezois. We come to the understanding that in fact there will come a time of Tzaddik Atomar Yifrach, where the Tzaddik in fact will bloom and he will blossom. There will come a time, Lo'ilam Haba, which is the Zman of Mizmor Shilya Shabbos. Yom Shekul Shabbos, and when that time arrives, then we will all understand as we conclude, we'll come to the realization, to the conclusion of Lahagid Ki Yosher Hashem. Tzuri, V'loy Avlos Aboy, and there's no Avl at all in anything that Kodesh be created. Because Olam Haba, we will understand that every chelik in the Bria basically is not a dover nifred at all, but it all serves the common hashlama of the bigger, beautiful picture, as the Ramchal pointed out. So what the Ramchal really is telling us, if we connect it with the Maral, it means when the Maral tells us that Losalova we will understand, it means because Losalova will come to the realization to look at the world in the way that Ramchal paints it. Because Ramchal has just taught us that the emphasis is that each chelik in the Bria is not a dover nifred at all, but they are all needed, and they are mekusher, and they're meyuchas one with the other. They're all interrelated and interconnected in order to bring about one specific tachlis, to be megalik kvoid malchusa v'yoyla. When Maral tells us that Losalova we will understand that it means, because Losalova we will see the world in the way that the Ramchal tells us the way it is. And therefore all the kashas will fall aside. And them is based upon what we have just learned, how wonderful are the words of Reb Tzaddik HaKoyen of Lublin in his sefer Pri Tzaddik. Reb Tzaddik points out on the posik, Ani Avir Kol Tuvi Lefanecha. The intent of the posik is that Kodesh Baruch Hu was saying to Moshe Rabbeinu, in spite of all of the misfortune that we see, but I want you to understand, I will show you one day, Ani Avir Kol Tuvi Lefanecha, She'yira Lo Shehakol L'Toivo. Kodesh Baruch Hu says, I will show you that everything is L'Toivo. That in fact, even the Chet Egel, that there's a positive side even to the Chet Egel, although we are not able to understand this. But nevertheless, Ani Avir Kol Tuvi Lefanecha, I will show you how everything is L'Toivo. So Reb Tzaddik HaKoyen v'hu ma'ashenema, this is what the posuk means, v'ro'iso es achoirai v'goymer, ufonai lo yiro. The kavan of the posuk is, the v'ro'iso es achoirai, you will only be able to see things in hindsight. Later, many years later, you'll be able to look back and understand all of that which you didn't understand. But ufonai lo yiro, but we have not the ability, we do not have the capability of understanding things ahead of time. So Reb Tzaddik v'Shemati Rabbeinu HaKodesh Zecher Tzaddik v'Kodesh Levrocha L'chai Olam Haba. This is the Rebbe of Reb Tzaddik, the Ishbitzer Rebbe, was the Talmud of the Kotzker Rebbe. The Ishbitzer Rebbe says, Shaperishu, you know what it means, V'rovisos Achoirai. Sha'achar HaMaisa, that after the Maisa, Hiker Tekiv Moshe Rabbeinu Olav HaSholem Ha'oimik V'atoy V'atzofim Boy. It was later, only after the Maisa, that Moshe Rabbeinu ultimately understood the depth of the Torah that was hidden. But you should be able to see it and understand it before. Therefore it says, you will not be able to see it ahead of time. And this, in fact, now we understand what the Targum Unkelis says. The Serze Yas de Basre. You'll be able to see that which is behind me. But that which is before me you will not see. The Hainu, the intent of that is, Lohovin Mekoidim, Shugamkin L'Toive, that you will not be able to see, Atkan Dvar V'Agdoishi. So the Tzaddik, that the truth is, V'chein B'Golos Mitzray. HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed Moshe Rabbeinu the hidden Toiv that there was in Golos Mitzrayim. Of course, when we look at Golos Mitzrayim, and we see of all of the Tsar and all of the Tsaras that the Yidden went through in Mitzrayim, Redu Shonim, 210 years, which the Torah says really amounts, in fact, to being in Golos 400 years. How are we to understand? How can we see? How can we find any good hidden in Golos Mitzrayim? Says Reb Tzaddik that B'chein B'Golos Mitzrayim Herolei Hashem Yisbarach Eich Shekol Shalvas Mitzrayim LaAvida Moilu Toiva. That all of the Mitzrayim that he intended to do and to destroy the Yidden, that all they attempted to do L'maise, it turns out it was a Toiva because they came Oye B'Sham Kol HaChochmes. Mitzrayim living Bishalva, living in comfort and in tranquility, That allowed Mitzrayim to prosper and become a center in the world for culture and for Chachma. And as a result, being that everything located itself in Mitzrayim, we had a central point to be able to remove the sparks of Kedusha, says Reb Tzadok. Ubegolos hoitziu anitzutzin kadishim, man. As you know that when the Yidden were Mitzrayim, they actually removed all of the cracked sparks of Kedusha that were hidden in Mitzrayim. And the fact that Mitzrayim became a center of culture where all of the chachmas of the world concentrated themselves in Mitzrayim, it means that Mitzrayim had a center place where the Tzutzei Kedusha were trapped from all over, were found in Mitzrayim, and the Eden therefore had the opportunity to release and to redeem and to elevate all of these Nitzutz and Kadishin. In addition, this being a Achona for Matan Torah. So Reb Tzadok, I want you to know that V'cheinu behem is kol ha'goli is l'toiva. The same way also all of the golis and all of the golis in the Yidden went through. We know that there are 4 golis besides Mitzrayim. The golis Modai, golis Bovel, golis Yovan, golis Edoi. But in the present time, la yuchal odam lamoid al zeh. We're not able to fathom it. We cannot comprehend it. We can't understand it. Therefore it says, ahead of time, we're not able to see it. But there will become a time where we will look behind, and then we will see the total picture, and we'll have a havon, and we'll be able to see the hidden good that is in all of those areas that we at first perceived superficially, that in fact it is Ra. Just to show you something very interesting of how great minds and great tzaddikim and great Talmidei Chachomim think alike, we find this similar vort that Tzaddik says the name of his Rebbe, the Ishbitzer. We find also in the Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer says, V'zeh. This is the meaning of the posik, V'ro'iso es achoirai. La'acher shenasa tachlis adovar tire v'tovin l'mafreya. It is only in hindsight that after everything is done and completed, you'll look back and you'll understand Mashehoyo mashenase. Avalesfonai lo yiro. Koidem asiyas adovar lo yiro v'lo yavinu tachlisoi. V'zeh. That's the kavanah of the posik, Ufonai lo yiro. So we come to the realization that now, while we are still here in this world, it is very difficult and very hard for us to understand what is the purpose of many, many situations in the world that we perceive to be Ra. But as we already learned from the Maral and from the Ramchal and Das Tvunos, we combined the two together, that Olam Haba. So the Maral, then we will see the Hashlom, the Shabbos is the Hashlom of the world. Then we will see a perfect world. We will look at the world with different lenses. We will then see the bigger picture. As Ramchal points out, we will then come to the realization, we will understand that all the Chalokim in the Bria are not things for themselves. They're not individual pieces that have their own individual tachlis. They are all part of a single puzzle and a bigger, beautiful picture. So therefore now, to understand exactly what the Makon of Shabbos was, the question that we raised in the beginning of this year, behooves us to take a look a little bit at the Malbim. The Malbim also addresses himself to his question, and we will use the Malbim, that we'll take the idea of the Malbim and connect it with the ideas that we have just now prepared. So we will veer off a little bit slightly from the Malbim, but we will use the Malbim for our benefit. Let's take a look what the Malbim say. Ki oisi beini benechem. Says the Malbim, Ki oisi beini benechem v'Shabbos yud beis amad beis on the posuk Lodas Kani Hashem Mekadishchem Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu LaMoshe. Moshe matona toivi yesh lo bebeis genozai. I have a choshev matona, a good matona, in my treasure house. V'Shabbos shema v'anim mevakesh lista l'Yisrael eich v'oidio. Says the Malbim, without raising the question over here, Rotza loimar. It's evident that the Malbim also was bothered. What is this new matona that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving Klal Yisrael in the form of Shabbos, when we know that in fact Shabbos was already long given to us? So what is the new matona? What is the new yediyah that Moshe Rabbeinu is supposed to impart to Klal Yisrael, that they are receiving now a great matona, a matona toiva called Shabbos? There's nothing new about Shabbos. So the Malbim Rotzaloimer, the intent of this Chazal is, because I want you to know, says Malbim, Kitanuge Olam Haba, because the pleasure of Olam Haba efshir sheyasik odam b'chayim. On this world, we have no hasoge whatsoever. We cannot understand. We cannot comprehend. We cannot relate to the idea of the immense, tremendous pleasures of Olam Haba. Ki ba'id ha'nefesh kishura b'chaymer. Because calls man that the neshama is still connected with the material, with our guf. It's impossible even to imagine. Certainly we don't know, we can't be masking, but even to imagine, it's not shaykh even to imagine. What it means, tanug ha'nefesh, the pleasure that the neshama will derive. Ha'bilti nikshur b'chaymer. In other words, Olam Haba, of course, is reserved for the neshama. And calls man that the neshama is connected to the chaymer, we have no idea how the neshama alone can find this tremendous pleasure, because we relate to the neshama as a neshama while it's connected to our guf. That is our hasogah, neshama-wise. And therefore we cannot even imagine and begin to fathom, even to scratch the surface of how a neshama feels when the neshama is totally divorced from the guf. And to realize the tremendous pleasure that the neshama can receive in Olam Haba. And it is for this very reason, says the Malbim, Al Kain, Hechrish B'Torah Mi Yehuda Olam Haba. That's why. This is the reason that we find that the Torah B'chlal does not talk about Olam Haba, about promising schar Olam Haba. As we notice in the Torah, when the Torah talks about schar for mitzvahs, it always talks about things b'negei to Olam Hazeh. Whether it's im b'chukois ha'tilechu v'nesatik yishmeichem bitom, again Olam Hazeh. And then in Parish of Krishma, what does it say? Always we find the Torah promises schar, it talks about in Yonim of Olam Hazeh. And the obvious question is, why doesn't the Torah mention the designated schar which is prepared l'Olam Haba? And in fact, this is a kasha which was bothered by the greats of all time. No less than the Maral himself discusses it in a place. The Malbim tells us that the reason is because we would have no asagi. You're going to tell me schar l'Olam Haba? It is something b'chlal. It would be sort of a situation that, what does it mean? What are you telling me about Olam Haba? What does that mean? That we are in our earthly bodies. We have no asagi. We can't even imagine what that means. However, says the Malbim, when Shabbos comes, it is different. Our hasagis change totally, completely, because our constitution changes. Olam Shabbos u'echad meshishim Olam Haba. Shabbos happens to be 1/60th of Olam Haba. Dochein nosam lahem mitzvah Shabbos. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu now is giving klal of the mitzvah of Shabbos, which means shemin oinik Shabbos. From the pleasure of Shabbos, yasigu tam minyona Olam Haba. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to give us an opportunity to experience and be margish somewhat in the ein of Olam Haba, even while we are still here by Olam Hazeh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu took a shtickle Olam Haba and brought it down to Olam Hazeh, that we should be able to be margish and experience Olam Habadik, even while in fact we are physically in Olam Haba. And V'zeh Shomar, and it's precisely this idea that is being presented that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says when Chazal tell us, Matona toiva yesh li bebeis genozai v'shabbos shemo. What it means is, Shuschar Olam Haba. I'm giving them not only the mitzvah of Shabbos. Of course, the mitzvah of Shabbos they already had. They had it in Moros, mentioned this Eretz Adibris. But what is being given to Klal Yisrael is the Tanug of Shabbos, the Oynig of Shabbos, the Olam Habadik experience of Shabbos. That is being now imparted to the Bnei Yisrael. Shenikra Shabbos HaGodol. It's the Shabbos of Olam Haba. That's why it's called the Shabbos HaGodol. But it's the Yom Shekul Shabbos. Shehi Matona Toiva Viba Beis Genozov. That's why it's referred to as a Matona, which is the Beis Genozov of this treasure house. Because Olam Haba, truly speaking, is not down here. Olam Haba is in the upper world. It's hidden from us. Kushboga took out a shtickle Olam Haba from his Beis Genozov. He took out a shtickle Olam Haba from the Olam Yisrael Yoinim and brought it down here in the form of Shabbos. Because b'derech klal sheyef sheyargish oisa yoda b'chayo bina, we said, little bit, says the Kodesh Baruch Hu. I want to give Klal Yisrael a little bit of Olam Haba in this world as well. V'ani mevakish listen Yisrael. I want to give a little bit of Olam Haba that I have stashed away up in the Olam Yisrael Yoinin. Shem Yirshua Shabbos, that you yarshin the Shabbos, Hagonus Hazeh, L'Olam Haba. The Shabbos, which is Yom Chikul the Shabbos, which in fact, in its fullest sense of the word, will be experienced L'Olam Haba. But I want to give them some taste of its Boilam as well. Vani roitzel idea ma'at mimeno, somewhat, a little bit of a taste, a little bit of a spear. Boilam hazeh. And this will be our mitzvah Shabbos shal yodo narigish tanuge olam haba. We'll be able to be marigish tanuge olam haba. If you have misbein in what we are talking about, based upon the Maral and the Ramchal, then we will understand very clearly the difference of the chilik between Tfilas Chol and Tfilas Shabbos. But Tfilas Chol, the Yid gets up and he says, Morabu Masecha Hashem Kulam Chol Masisa. He looks at the Kodesh Baruch Hu's wonderful, wonderful creation, and instinctively he expresses himself with song, with ecstasy. He says, Morabu Masecha Hashem, Rabbeinu Shalom, you created such a wonderful world. But his perception at that time is Morabu Masecha Hashem. What he sees is Ribu Maisim in the Bria. He sees Ribu Maisim, many, many different things. And Avada from these different Maisim, he receives his pilus and he says, Morabu Masecha Hashem. But what he sees is many, many Chalokim. And according to his Avon at that time, they have no shaykhs one to the other. And based upon that Ashkofa, yes, on the one hand, he's able to say Morabu Masecha Hashem. But based upon that Ashkofa, if he sees the world as being a world of Ribu Maisim, it's still shaykh, it's Yitochim, the Chazishon, it can fall into the great kasha of Tzadik Varalo and Rosh V'Toivlo, as the Ramban mentions in the Akdama Tehiyu. However, when it comes to Shabbos, there's Kofif. Shabbos is totally different. Because Shabbos is the Ashlom of the entire Bria, which means that on Shabbos it becomes clearly revealed the Bechina of Yotzer HaKoil. On Shabbos we come to the realization there is nothing benifra, there's nothing separate, but rather each and every chelik, kol chelik v'chelik of the Bria, is one hashlama of one big picture together, whose purpose is to bring out from each and every nivra the kovod of HaKadosh Baruch Hu be'elamoi. And therefore now we can better understand why we emphasize on Shabbos when we say, HaKoil yoiducha, the HaKoil yishabchucha, the HaKoil yoimru en kodesh kashen. Because that is the Ikar Yesod in the Shevach of Shabbos, not to look at everything beniprid. The Ikar Shir of Shabbos, Mizmar Shir Yom HaShabbos, is Lahagid Ki Yosher Hashem. And that is why, because we understand that HaKoil yoiducha and HaKoil yishabchucha, that the entire Bria, Kula Yachab, together, expressed in the form of a symphony, the Hoidah, the Nizmar Shil Yom HaShabbos, Toiv L'Hoidus Hashem. It's not that each chelik expresses it on its own, but it's all part of one symphony together in one harmony and in unison to bring out the tremendous Shira and the Ashlam of Shabbos and to think thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, as we just learned in the Malbut, the Shabbos is a Matana Tova, which means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to give Kal a taste of Olam Haba. If it, on Shabbos, according to the Malbut, that each and every Yid is able to be toyim, is able to taste Emen Olam Haba, it means, therefore, that on Shabbos we come to the realization of Hakol Yeducha. Now we understand the Maral. Why on each and every Shabbos we come to the realization of Toiv L'Hoidus Hashem and the Hagid Ki Yosher Hashem? Because Shabbos basically is already now, even before Mashiach comes. Each and every Shabbos we are whisked out of Olam Hazeh and transplanted into the world of Olam Haba. Shabbos is Mein Olam Haba, which means we come to the Hasog of HaKoil Yoiducha, HaKoil Yishabchucha, that all of the Chalokim of the Bria, they are not a Dover Nifrad, that everything together is one big Ashlama Gedoyla, serving one Tachlis Abriya, she is Galak Kivoid Malchusa Be'olam. So now we come to the idea that everything is Toiv, because everything together about it's Toiv, and there's no Shum Metzias of Tzadik V'Ra'aloi. But all is Tzadik Atomar Yifrach and the Hagid Ki Yosher Hashem. Which basically means that when Shabbos comes, all the kashas vet for efforts. All the kashas that a Yid has on the Anhog of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they all become answered. And when it comes to Shabbos by Mincha, Agav, I did not mention this in the Shir on Shabbos. And therefore, when he begins Friday night, he said, and he works his way through Shabbos to come to the Shabbos min Olam Haba experience, to come to the realization that Hakol Yeducha, the Hakol Shebrucha, that the entire world are not different Chalokim, but rather they're all Chalokim of one big picture. And he comes to the realization of the Hagid Kiyosher Hashem. So when he comes already ultimately to Shabbos by Mincha, then he says with even more clarity, he says, Ato Echad, Vishimcha Echad, that everything is Echad, Echad, Echad. Now you understand that everything is Mamish Echad. And there are no Pratim in the Bria, but rather everything is one big Hashlama Gedoyla. It's Ketayt to add, it over Nifle from the Imre Emes, the Ger Rebbe is the Choyin Lebrocha. The Ger Rebbe pointed out that we say, in the davening in Shabbos, we say, Yismach Moshe b'matnas chelkoi, ki yeven neman karos aloi, kril seferet b'roisho nesat aloi. And we say, Uchnei luches avonim hoyer biyodei v'chosem b'hem shmir Shabbos. V'chein kosem b'soyresecha, v'shomru b'nei sos ha-Shabbos. And then as we have here, basically we have two starke kashas. First of all, what are we saying? That Moshe Rabbeinu Shnei Luchas Avonim Hoyer B'Yodoi, that Moshe Rabbeinu brings down Shnei Luchas Avonim, and what does it say in the Luchos? V'chosem b'hem Shmir Shabbos, and it's written in there Shmir Shabbos. The obvious question is, only Shmir Shabbos is written in the Luchos? The entire Seres HaDibros were written on the Luchos. So why is he mentioning the Shnei Luchas Avonim Hoyer B'Yodoi v'chosem b'hem Shmir Shabbos? And then we conclude by saying, "V'chein kosem b'soresecha," and so bemis Shmir Shabbos is written the Torah. And what does he quote as a raya? That Shmir Shabbos is written the Torah. So he brings the Shomru b'nei Yisrael as Shabbos. V'chein kosem b'soresecha, Shomru b'nei Yisrael as Shabbos. And the question is, why is he bringing a pasuk in Parshas Ki Sisa? V'shomru b'nei Yisrael as Shabbos. He should have brought the psukim that are written in the Luchas themselves. Either Zochas Yom Shabbos l'Katshoi, or Shomor Yom Shabbos l'Katshoi. Why is he bringing a totally different parasha of Shabbos, which is unrelated to the Luchas themselves? Says the Imre Emes that I want you to know that the Shas Shviras Aluchas Parchu Kol Oisius Liyavir, that all of the Oisius of the Luchas, the actually that they flew off the Luchas, and actually they would suspended themselves, they flew up into the air. He went back to Shemayim, all of the Oisius of the Luchas. They removed themselves from the Luchas, B'shas Shviras Aluchas, and they went back to Shemayim. There were Oisius Parchas B'yaver, floating in the air. Chutz, except, says the Imre Emes, the Oisius of Shmir Shabbos. The Oisius of Shmir Shabbos always remained chokuk, remained etched and carved on the Luchas. Even after the Chetuego, where the rest of the Oisius of the Luchas were Parchas B'yaver, but not the Oisius of Shmir Shabbos. And a right to this, as the Imre Emes is, because after the Chetuegel, the Dibur Harishan, the first Dibur that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to Klal Yisrael was, as we see in Pasuk Ki Sisa, V'shomru b'nei Yisrael to Shabbos. Of course, we are going with the Shittim, we know the Machlokes are showing what came first. Was Chetuegel first? Or do we say, Ein Mugdal Micha B'Torah? We say, Ein Mugdal Micha B'Torah means V'shomru b'nei Yisrael really is after the Chetuegel, in Pasuk Ki Sisa. So the Dibur Harishan, and Moshe Rabbeinu speaks to Klal Yisrael after the Chetuegel with V'shomru b'nei Yisrael Shabbos to show us, to teach us that the Chetuegel was at Shoilet on the Luchas regarding Shabbos. Therefore, this is the meaning when we say, Ushnei Luchas Avonim Hoyer B'Yodoi, that means even after the Hoyer B'Yodoi, means even after the Shviras HaLuchas, the Chosov Behem is still written, Shemira Shabbos, where all of the other Oisius of the Seres HaDibros are no longer there. The exception is that Shnei Luchas Avonim Hoyer B'Yodoi, and what always remained there, the Kosu Behem written there, Adayin, still forever remaining on the Luchas of Shmir Shabbos. What's the riot? The riot is because the Chen Kosu B'Toresecha V'Shomru b'nei Yisrael Shabbos. Because after the Chetuegel, we find that the Dibur Rishon that Moshe Rabbeinu speaks to Klal Yisrael is V'Shomru, to show that the Chetuegel was not chose as Shmir Shabbos. So the question we might ask, and now this is the beautiful Isofet, to what we said before, to what the Ger Rebbe is saying, we're now making a connection. Because why is this taka so? Why is this taka this exception? And as the Ger Rebbe tells us and brings us a raya that this is in fact so, that Shmir Shabbos is different. that Shmir Shabbos always remained chokuk on the luchas. But why is it so? Why is it that Shmir Shabbos was zeicher, that its oisi is always remained on the luchas? And the reason for this is because the reason the Dapke Shmir Shabbos remain on the luchas, because being that we have just learned now from the Malbim and from the Maral that Shabbos Bemis is made Olam Haba, it means that the Shabbos the Gedei is the Bechina of the Marishin Koidem Achet, and the Pegam of the Chetuegel was not able to be shoylet in the union of Shabbos. Chetuegel can only be shoylet on inyanim regarding Olam Hazeh. Chetuegel has no shlita, has no power over situations that are out of this world, that are beyond this world. Be the Shabbos is the Bechina Olam Haba, the Chetuegel has no shayches, and the Chetuegel was not able to be pegim in the union of Shemir Shabbos, and therefore Shemir Shabbos remained unaffected in the luchas. And therefore, when Shabbos comes, everything is for Emfort. All the kaises are for Emfort for a Yid. Because a Yid, when he stands up Shabbos, and he says, Mizmor Shilim on Shabbos, he's actually marbish, he feels in his bones, V'hagid Kiyosh Hashem, he comes to the realization that Hakol Yeducha and Hakol Shabchucha. It's Kedai just to mention one more Nekuda, and that is that the Chidah brings out a wonderful observation. We find, regarding Shemir Shabbos, in the various parashas of Shabbos, we find 4 times we find the word he. For example, like Ki ois he, beini ubenechem, l'das ki ani Hashem mekadishchem. We find 4 times the word he in the parish of Shabbos. However, we find there's a shinoi between the kri and the ksiv. The ksiv is with a vav, but the kri is with a chirik. We read it he, but it's written with a vav, which is who. We have to understand what is the biur dvarim. Why is it that by Shabbos that we have all of the he's that we find by Shabbos, there's a difference between the kri and the ksiv, that the ksiv is with a vav and the kri is with a chirik. And the biur dvarim, based upon what we learned, is gewaldik. Because the Maral tells us that Olam Hazeh, this world is keneged ois vav. Because this world has 6 kitzavos, has 6 sides. Is the 4 sides, and then the mal and the mata. Look, we have a box. The box has 4 sides, and then we have the top and the bottom, so we have 6 sides. And that's why we say taka 6 times hakoil, which can negate all of the halakim we have in the bria, which is 6 sides. However, the nekuda hapnimis, which is in the middle, that's the ois yud. The nekuda hapnimis is ois yud, which is keneged olam haba. And we know Chazal tell us, in fact, himself is Menachos on the posuk, ki beko Hashem surah Olam Yudkei, that olam haba was nibra biyud. So therefore, when it comes to Shabbos, we say the word he with a yud. The kri is with a yud to tell us that although like olam hazeh, we are living in olam hazeh. So Bemis olam hazeh basically is a vav, because olam hazeh is represented by the ois vav, as the Maral tells us. But when Shabbos comes, this ois vav, in fact, the panemius of this ois vav is truly a yid, and a yid represents olam haba. That is the ois yud. As the Gemara, in fact, says, that's why we have a shinui between the kri and the ksiv. And therefore, we also understand the kasha that we asked regarding Kedushas Keser. Why is it the Dafka on Shabbos that you didn't say Kedushas Keser? Tosis pointed out in Menachos. It's an Hedron rather. Daflam Zayin on the days. Why is it the Dafka on Shabbos that they say the Kedush of Keser? Because we say in Kedushas Keser, we point out to say that Kevoidoi Molei Olam, that the entire world is filled with Kavod Hashem, meaning to say that there are no Chalakim in the Bria, that there are no Pratim in the Bria. When it comes to Shabbos, we say that rather it is Hakoil, it is one Shtik Hashlama Gedoil, is one big Hashlama. It's Kavoidoi Molei Olam, that the entire world together is filled from one thing, and that is from Kavod HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because when it comes to Shabbos, we recognize that Hakoil Yoducha V'Hakoil Yishabchucha. And therefore, since we come to this realization only on Shabbos, so therefore there's the opinion of that shit in Toises, that is Dafka on Shabbos, that in fact that we say Kiddush of Keser, to bring out that Kevoidoi Molei Olam, that the entire world is filled only with one thing, and that is to bring about Kvod Shemayim. So when Shabbos comes, we are Zeiche, to be Margish and to be Toim Me'ein Olam Haba, as the Malbim tells us. And therefore we now understand very well again what the Maral tells us, that Mizmor Shil Yom HaShabbos, that on Shabbos we were able truly to sing the song and to say Toiv L'Hoidis L'Hashem, and not to be perturbed and not to be bothered by the kashas of Bifroyach V'Shoim K'mo Yetzev, because we have to understand that in this world our Havon and our Seichel is very, very limited. We are in the Bechin of Yishbar Lo Yedoch Sula Yovin Azois. But we will come to the realization by Mizmor Shil Yom HaShabbos that in fact Tzadik HaTomar Yifrach, The Hagid Kiyosher Hashem, Tzuri Veloyav Losa Boy, Amen Ken Yerotzik.